Hello and welcome to a special edition of FreeCodeSession. My name is Jason Bach, and I want to talk a little bit about strings in this episode. So if you've used C# before, you've, in all likelihood, used strings in your code. You've either created constants in your code like this, or you've created a string like this. Either way, the way to do it has just been to use a double quote on each side of the string. You could also do what's called a multi-line string here, but really this is a verbatim string. And what a verbatim string does is lets you write a string as a multi-line string. This has been there from 1.0. In 6.0, we were able to do interpolated strings. So you see here, we put the $ in front of the double quote, and then we can put a hole in our string that we fill with some data. There were ways in the past to do this with string format, but this is a little bit nicer syntax. So this is a way to do interpolated strings in C#, and it's the way I prefer to do it because it reads better to me. Okay, you could also do verbatim interpolated strings. So you can make multi-line strings and put data in the string. But this is a little, I don't say ugly, but the problem is white space. You notice that I'm putting all these right at the beginning of the code, and that's because C# is looking at how much white space is here. And if you want to do something like code, like this in a string, then you have to put it over on the left, which isn't a big deal. But I'd rather not have the data within the string have to be pushed all the way over the left. I'd rather it be marked by where the string is actually defined, where it's starting and ending. And so in C#11, you see something now called a raw string literal. So you can actually define raw string literals like this with 3 double quotes. And it can be a single line string that has no interpolation. You can add interpolation if you want, and you can also make it a multi-line string. And notice that in this case, the indentation starts with the opening set of double quotes. This is a little nicer because I personally think this reads better. And if you want, again, you can do a multi-line, but you can also, when you do raw strings, if you need to embed some code, like I've done with source generators, or if you're working with JSON or XML, what's nice about this is you can print this out in your string like so, but more importantly, you don't have to worry about escaping if you have interpolated strings, which is something that sometimes got in the way with verbatim strings. For example, you can see here, we still have our code that, again, this is just C# code within a string. It's not going to do anything, but if I wanted to emit this string in a source generator, it's nice that I can just use the single curly brace here. But if I want to put in some data in the string as an interpolated string, I just can now say 2 curly braces. And that says this is where a hole is going to get filled in your interpolated string. And that is defined by this. If I had a case where something needed 3 curly braces as the literal text within a string, then I could just say, you know what, if you want to do any interpolation, you just do that. And now notice that this is now literally part of the string. But if I add in 2 more, now it suddenly lights up because that's a hole to fill in your string. Okay, so that's the state of strings in C#. But what I want to propose to you and just think about with strings is, should we all just start using raw string syntax from this point on? And here's a reason why. So this is SharpLab, where I took that code from my Visual Studio application and put it in here. And I did this because I wanted to see the underlying IL, or intermediate language, that this code is emitted to. Now notice if I click over here, you'll see that it highlights where it is in the code on the left. Okay, but the thing I really want you to notice is all the strings are just LDSTR for the most part. But it doesn't matter if it's a literal string, or if I go to where verbatim string is, that's right here. You'll notice that it actually does the new line right within the string. If I move down to where I have a raw string way down here, this will actually be interesting. If I go to a multi-line raw string here, that is also just an LDSTR. This one with the multi-line raw string interpolated string, this one actually uses something called default interpolated string handler. And this is a new type in .NET that does some really nice optimizations with strings when you're doing interpolated strings. So the compiler will omit this to get some perf benefits when it deems fit. The point, though, is if you look at the parts that C# has omitted for this string, for example, this line right here, well, actually, let's go back up to here. You'll see that it says the answer is, and then it's just going to do the random number generation there. If I go down to the raw string interpolated code here, you'll notice that it'll do as much as it can with all of the new lines in it, except when it has to do a call to the random number generator. Okay. So all these end up being LDSTR ops. And that's the point I'm trying to make here. The syntax in C# doesn't really matter. It ends up being the quote unquote same thing. So there's no penalty, there's no performance penalty if you would decide to declare a string like this with 3 double quotes. As again, if I come back up here and I say this is a single line raw string, same thing. There'd be no difference than if you just use a single double quote. If I wanted to change all my code in C# to do raw strings everywhere, well, in Visual Studio, I do have a couple of refactorings. For example, if I bring up the refactorings here, you'll notice I get convert to raw string. And so I can also pick, in this case, just document, because there's only one program CS, there's only one CS file in this project. But if I had a big solution, I could just say solution, and this would do it across my entire solution as a one and done operation. So let's say document here, and I'm done. Okay. Now, in some cases with the verbatim string, well, like in this case, it will only give you the option to say convert to a regular string, which really isn't what we want. So if I say regular string here, well, now it embedded the multi-line there. Yeah, it's in some cases, it's not giving you the option to go to a raw string. Though in this case here, if I do that, you'll notice I get a raw string option. And again, I could pick across a particular scope in my solution to change all this. The point of all these refactorings is that if I have a code base that I have a mix and match, I can get really close to making them all raw strings. And again, why I'm emphasizing this is one, it's all the same IL at the end of the day. But two, I think this gives you a lot more flexibility than trying to do all different kinds and ways of handling strings. If you start to just say, let's do these as all raw strings, sure, you have to type in 3 double quotes. That can get a little cumbersome. But then if I just said, well, wait a minute, this actually needs to be a bunch of multi-lines, I can just do this, and there's no change in the actual syntax around the string to say make it multi-line. I just do it, and it's done. That's why I'm doing this video. I want you to think about a little bit doing it this way. In retrospect, this is one of those cases of if you could do C# over again, what would be some of the things we would like to see? Well, maybe like this. I think the raw string syntax had to do something a little different with triple double quotes because it needed some kind of marker, some kind of syntax that's different than what we have strings right now. But if we could start all over, we could just say this defines a string, and it could be a multi-line string here. Okay. And if I needed, and this is the same thing with raw strings right now, if I need to put 3 double quotes in my string, like let's say somewhere in here, and I know this is kind of like C# code in a string, but let's just say I needed to do, here is my string. So I'm like in string mode here, and then this would put me out, but that's not what I want. Well, then I would just say, you know what, that's that's what I'm doing. 2 double quotes. And if I needed 2, I put 3. That's what you do with raw string literals right now. You just increase the number of double quotes so that you don't have to escape or make a double quote a literal double quote in your string. You just make it different, and then it just works. And then if we needed to do interpolation, we would just do a $sign there. There would be no verbatim string because a raw string, I think, would handle all those cases. So it would be nice if that would be the one way to rule them all, but that's never going to happen. There's way too much C# code out there to ever make this a possibility. Even if you said, well, we could create all the refactorings to change all the code so that it works that way, that would be a huge breaking change, and that would never happen. But that's why, again, I'm recommending, or at least suggesting, to start thinking of your strings as all of them being raw strings. I'm not even sure I want to go that far. I'm debating in my head, is that going a little bit over the edge? But yet, I think there's an advantage here in terms of flexibility. So what do you think? Do you think this is a really not so good idea, or is this something that you're going to contemplate and consider if you're in C#11 or beyond? So leave your comments and questions below. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next episode.